Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch.
Hello and welcome to Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/drive-in-double-feature-podcast. Just for $5 a month, you can help support the show. And also you get some fun bonus episodes, stuff about us just talking, reviews of modern movies. But it doesn't affect regular content here. It's just if you want to support us. But getting into today's episode, we're back again. We rushed through and it feels like we just talked about James Bond like the other day, and now we're back at it. And we're talking about Goldfinger, probably one of the biggest movies in that whole franchise.
With a returning director, Guy Hamilton from Remo Williams.
Yes, you're right. And I guess we can determine if Remo or Goldfinger is better.
Well, finally.
The age-old question. Everybody has been asking that.
Definitely the one I remember the most out of all the Bond movies.
Yeah, this is the one out of all of the ones that I have seen. I remember getting to this point and being like, oh, okay, this is really where it started, right? Because Dr.No and From Russia with Love are good movies, but I feel like Goldfinger feels the most.
You were on the fence about this James Bond character.
Yeah, I didn't know. You know, he seemed like a weird guy, but now he's funny. He does more jokes this time, and I, you know what? I like him now. He's likable.
One of the biggest silver screen comedians, James Bond.
Yeah, James Bond, yes. James Bond, it's definitely, that character really becomes his film persona here, and a lot of elements from the later movies are here, like the opening being a completely different story. We have an opening title that has nothing really to do with the rest of the movie. No,
that has nothing to do with it at all, and that would become a staple in later movies where it would just have like a little mini adventure and then they would kind of tease what's going to be happening like at the end of the adventure.
Exactly, yeah, and I like that. I think it just adds some kind of like energy to it. It gets you settled. I think you listened to the commentary track for this one.
And I also watched the documentary that was associated with it, too.
They were talking about how this opening sequence, it was kind of daring. They didn't know if it was going to work, but it does such a good job of getting you in the right mood. Because those first 2 movies, different director, it kind of has a different feeling, different style. It's a little more, I guess, serious with its espionage. But here, we kind of get settled into its silliness. Yes, yeah, James Bond shows up with a nice fake seagull on his head as he sneaks his way into a place he's bombing. Just silly. And you know what? I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it's a fun time. What I like is there's a lot more, it's like I guess to make it Bond a lot more marketable because, there's like a bunch of different gadgets in this movie. Probably has one of the most iconic cars in a movie ever.
Yes, yeah, the Aston Martin that they have.
Yeah, so it's kind of like one of those where you're like, oh, okay, like this is why people like him a lot. Like you said, it's just, it makes a lot of sense because he really does appeal to all the demographics because they keep saying, it's like women want to be with him, men want to be him, and, little kids, they want to be him too, because they want to have like fun adventures and shoot out and do spy missions.
Yeah. And that's what it is. I was hearing a lot on the commentary that people were taking like kids to see this movie. At the time. And it appealed to that demographic. Not that I don't think children should have been seeing this, but I could see why a movie like this could appeal to kids. Also, being a kid and seeing a movie is a weird thing because a lot of stuff just goes over your head rather than it messes with you.
Yeah, I don't really, I think it's appropriate for kids. I think if you're like 7 or 8 years old, it wouldn't be that bad. I mean, the only scene is another one of the most like, one of the most well-known scenes from the entire series, which, well, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it's the when James Bond discovers the golden girl and she's naked in bed, but you don't see anything, but
yeah, it covers everything up. But definitely like very, pushing it for 1964 for sure. And I mean, the implications there, they never say it. Well, the villain in this one is the title of the movie, Goldfinger. And literally he's made this girl gold because he loves gold so much that he wants to make love to golden women, which is something. They never say that in the movie. And I kind of get why, but I think that's interesting.
So let me ask you, okay, so now you brought him up. So the credits roll that plays the song Goldfinger, and now listening to the lyrics of this song, and let's say like you never had seen this movie before, and like the character they're describing, Goldfinger, is that who you would imagine Goldfinger to look like based off of that song?
No, not at all. It's funny because I was looking at the lyrics earlier too. And yeah, I mean, it's okay. So like Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch, sure. But just the way she sings about him, and it's like, it's very sexual, very like, this man he's hot stuff, like he could woo any woman that comes around.
It makes it sound like, he's like a real ladies man. He's super smooth, like he's like basically can get women and do whatever he wants, and then by the time he gets them, he does something bad with them. But but then when you see the character, which is played by Gert Frobe, he's an overweight older German guy. So just imagine like your uncle, just like just like hanging out, and it's like, oh, that's Goldfinger right there.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, right? His introduction is him at the pool wearing swim trunks, and he's looking like a chunky man, and he's playing cards like an old man, and that's Goldfinger.
That's Goldfinger for you. But that is Gert Frobe, and they said so on the commentary and the documentary is it was really interesting. So I think Guy Hamilton had scouted him at first, and he said he saw him. He's like, oh, he was wonderful in this movie. He's like, I believe he was playing a child molester.
Yes, that's exactly what I had heard. It's like, yeah, we saw him in this role where he played a child molester, and he was really good. It was like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess that's a way to find your evil character.
And they contacted his agent, and his agent said, they're like, oh, can he speak English? They're like, oh, yes, he could speak English. And then they said, like, the first day he showed up, he had said, oh, hello. And then after that was about the extent of his English.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Once again, there's always one character in these movies that's completely dubbed. And once again, at least for me, the first time I watched this, I didn't know until after he was dubbed. The dub work I thought was done really well. I thought it did a great job.
Oh, you would think that was his real voice, but they did say, he was super self-conscious. I mean, they said like he was a real sweetheart type of a guy. He was always really hardworking. He tried really hard to get the cadence right when he was speaking, so that way it would match up with the dubs. And he even though he wasn't talking in the movie, he was still working really hard on learning English.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it pays off because he's great. He is one of the great Bond villains, and I like Goldfinger so much because he's not over the top evil. We think about Dr. No, who we've seen before. He's not the same kind of evil, right? He just seems like a normal dude just with an obsession. And it's not world domination or anything like that. He just wants more gold. And I don't know, there's something about it that I like.
There's little things about the character that I like, though. He's so like you said, it starts out in Miami, and Goldfinger's like playing a card game, and they're kind of MI6 is like, oh, you need to tail this guy, see what he's up to, that type of thing. And
Hmm.
he's playing a poker game and he's cheating. And James Bond catches him because he has an accomplice, which is a female, which of course James Bond beds. But
Of course.
I really like it because you don't Goldfinger doesn't know that James Bond is the one that kind of got the better of him in that situation because
Hmm.
James Bond, is like, oh, you were cheating. Well, now you're going to lose, and makes him lose a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And then later, Bond catches up to him again, and they play a little golf game, and James Bond's like kind of having his fun with him and like making Goldfinger out to be like this fool.
Yeah, he
And
just looks
then
like a bumbling idiot.
But then at the end of the match, she was like, it's like, well, hopefully we don't have to meet again like last time. He's like, oh, were you watching me or whatever? And he's like, no, I think you know exactly what I'm referring to. So it's like Goldfinger knew the whole time
Yes.
that James Bond was the one that was messing with him in Miami.
Yeah, yeah, he knew. Yeah, no, I like that a lot too. I just really like this golf course scene though. I think because this was a rewatch for me, but during this golf course scene, it was when I clicked and I was like, oh, I really love this movie because it's fun. I don't know. A golf scene, which is really simple. There's not a lot of action. There's just something about it that's so playful. The way James Bond hides the ball from him because he's cheating and he's just trying. It's this whole game for about 10 minutes of them kind of back and forthing, and it's just a lot of fun and it's very simple.
Oh yeah. And I mean, in this one, Bond's probably, it's the most globe-trotting one that we've seen so far, I believe.
Yes, I would say
And
so.
because he's in America, goes to Switzerland, and he's in England, and he
Mhm.
goes back to America. And actually this is like the most American Bond movie, or one of the most
Yeah,
American ones.
the last hour of this movie happens in Kentucky, which I think that's a pretty American state already. So he's like in the heart of America.
I,
That's what they call
I,
Kentucky, right?
well, you're a little biased.
Just a little.
But no, I like it because I mean, so one thing they did like when this movie went in production, this movie got the same budget that From Russia with Love and Dr. No got combined. So
Yes, yeah.
so they had a lot more money, and it definitely shows, especially compared
Yeah.
to Dr. No when they had like almost no money.
Yeah, yeah, where stuff seemed really simple. Like I think about that tank. There's no way now that they would let something that looks like that in one of these Bond movies. Because I
Oh,
think about this Aston Martin, I wrote down the name of it, the Aston Martin DB5, and just the amount of detail that went into this car with the spikes for the wheels, the revolving license plate, the miniguns, how much money must have gone into that to really get, like, I mean, they attached it for when it was time for the shoot, but still it looks nice. So they definitely were making the most out of the budget.
oh yeah, and they did there's a little like special feature like documentary about the car too,
Hmm.
and they just said like how famous that car was, and people would be like they would take it on tour, and that there's only, I think they said there was only like 1,000 made or something like that, like in existence. But
Hmm.
Sean Connery had said that like so many people claim to have like the original Aston Martin, but it looks really good. But they said, since this was like from the 60s, now you can have like, cars have like these computers in there that can do all kinds of special things. Like, your car can track exactly where you go, or you're like, oh, I want to go here. And your car like, okay, well, just, take these directions. And,
Yeah.
but he said though, a lot of that stuff, like a lot of the gadgets in there were pneumatic. So they actually had to create devices to, so that way these like little gadgets and stuff can come out, and like the gun, like the bulletproof shield coming up and the revolving license plate. It was a lot of work they poured into it, and it definitely shows. And I thought it was really cool. And it's really not hard to see why that car is so iconic.
Yeah, yeah. Even me, who's not. I mean, we've talked about this before. I'm not a big car guy, but even that car, I'm like, that's a nice car. I like it. Not only that, but there's a Ford Mustang, which is its first time ever being in a movie, which is crazy. And that's being driven by. So we talked about this lady in Miami. She gets killed, covered in gold. Well, her sister is now in the movie, and she's out for vengeance against Goldfinger. And this character comes and goes really fast.
Yeah, and she has one of the most messed up moments of Bond history.
Okay.
In my opinion, because so she's out driving on the road, and James Bond. Well, you don't really know what her intentions are because James Bond sees her and she has a gun and she's shooting it, and you don't know that it's the Golden Girl's sister. But James Bond, at first you think she was trying to shoot at James Bond, but really she was trying to get revenge and shoot Goldfinger. And anyway, James Bond's got these spinning spike wheels that are, that shoot out from his tires, and he wants to see this girl, so he just drives up next to her and just totally slashes her tires as she's driving at a high speed, and she almost crashes into this little stone structure, almost dying.
And she doesn't, it's not just her tires. He destroys the whole side of her car, and then he has the guts to be like, oh, seems like a manufacturer error. Huh.
It's I never seen that before.
And he damn well knows he did it to her, and then he accosts her forever about this suitcase that she says has ice skates in it. This exchange I think is fun. There's something about Sean Connery does a great job of just being witty. He can play off of people so well, and he does it well here.
Yeah, and she meets an unfortunate death, like you said. And the guy that kills her is, James Bond has got his own, Batman, he's got his own rogue gallery of villains. And some of them are not necessarily the masterminds, but they're just as memorable as any of the main enemies. In fact, this character is probably even more well-known than even the title character of this movie.
I think so. Say. Yeah, I agree.
And that is Oddjob.
Yeah, this is Oddjob's movie.
Oh, it's his movie. All right. And he's a muscular Asian henchman. He's got a hat, a steel hat that he uses as kind of like a, what do you want to call it?
Kind of like a boomerang, right?
It's kind of like a boomerang, except it doesn't come back. But yeah.
Yeah, he throws in and kills people, kind of like Austin Powers. See, that's the power of Oddjob, that Austin Powers is a whole character in it that just parodies Oddjob, except he throws his shoe instead of the hat.
Do you know what that character is called in Austin Powers?
I feel like I should know, but no, I don't.
Random Task.
That that's really good, actually. What good movies, Austin Power movies. I gain appreciation for him the more we watch James Bond. But Oddjob he's just fun. He's a really fun, just big guy, and he's just mean. He breaks a golf ball in his bare hands at one point. And just the fact that he throws a hat to kill people, it is so ludicrous that you gotta love it. It's hard to hate.
And that's what Guy Hamilton was saying, because Guy Hamilton, he was out vacationing in Hawaii, and one of the things they saw was a wrestling match. And that's they saw this guy, Oddjob, Harold Sakurada, I believe.
Okay.
And he was out there wrestling, and he's like, oh, I got to put him in this movie. And they put him in there, and that's what Guy Hamilton says, these are not movies that are meant to take seriously. We want to, it's supposed to be kind of fun like that. And
exactly.
And he wanted to do a lot of fun stuff like that. And another thing too is he didn't want to make Bond a superhero type of character. because he didn't want him to be, because Bond gets beat up a lot in this one, and he gets captured more than once in this movie.
Yeah. And that's what's nice about it. Bond's not it adds stakes to it because Bond has to use his mind. He has to think his way out of things rather than I can just punch somebody and get out of it, because that's what ends up getting Odd Job in the end. Spoilers: Odd Job dies in the end. But
I know, it's sad. Hopefully we'll get a prequel movie at some point.
Hey, knowing how movies are going nowadays, I wouldn't be surprised.
So there's Odd Job in here, and of course, how could we forget the most interesting character in this movie, the most interesting character name, played by Honor Blackman. Oh, Nathan, what was her name again?
Oh, so I get to say it. Pussy Galore. What a name! I love hearing those two words together. Pussy Galore. When she introduces herself, it's
not separately though.
Huh? Yeah, no, not no, please, no. They have to be together. But I love the way she introduces herself, because James Bond gets knocked out, wakes up, sees Pussy Galore, and she says her name, and he says, "I must be dreaming." Still one of the funniest moments. I've seen it a billion times, but it's great.
I know. It's so Honor Blackman isn't, like I said, Honor Blackman is, up to this point, is probably the most famous Bond girl that had been cast in the movie, because she was actually a star before this, and she was on the TV show The Avengers. No, not Marvel. Don't. It's another secret agent type of show. But anyway, she was one of the main cast members of that, and she got cast in this role mainly one sense because they were looking for somebody that could do judo, that type of thing. And she did a lot of judo on that. And she was saying, because in this movie she does do a bit of judo, and there's one scene where like her and Bond are fighting in a barn, and she got thrown into this big bale of hay, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I was fine, because on the TV set, I would just get thrown into like big slabs of concrete. So this was like a vacation."
It was nice company. No, and I honestly, this character, I love this character. Honor Blackman just like kills it, knocks it out of the park. One of the best Bond girls ever. And she's not even like your normal Bond girl, because she's the bad guy. She's one of the bad guys for a good chunk of the movie. And just Sean Connery's trying to be charming to her, and she doesn't succumb to it at first, which I guess in the book she was a lesbian, but they took that out of the movie. It was 1964. But it's, I don't know, just the way she plays this character it's great. You don't like her?
No, I know that's not what I was going to say.
Oh, what's up?
I like her as a character. I was like, there is their first meeting that is a little questionable by today's standards.
Yes, what is that?
Well, when they're in the barn, like I said, they had like the little they had their little playful judo match, and then Bond gets on top of her, and he starts like forcing himself on top, like going in for like a kiss, and she's like, no, like trying to like struggle, and then he kisses her, and because his kiss is so great, then she's totally into it. Of course.
Wow, I love Sean Connery now. No,
then he slapped her.
Yeah, of course he did. But no, it's funny. This scene is really questionable. The first time I didn't really pay mind to it. It was the second time where I was like, it's not fast. It's not like a quick like, oh, I don't want it, and then very fast. It's like, you know what? Why not? It goes on for an uncomfortable amount of time.
Yeah, she's very adamantly against the idea at first, and she doesn't. But he's just so darn charming.
Yeah, it's Sean Connery. If there's a woman in this movie, it's I'm sorry, James Bond it just has to happen. Also, fun fact: it's the only time a Bond girl was older than who was playing James Bond at the time. It was actually 7 years older than Sean Connery.
Yeah, I did see that. And I did see like a list of like all the ages of all the Bond girls like at the time of filming, and I think she was definitely on the older end of the spectrum. So I don't know if she was the oldest, but definitely on the older end. So they were talking about James Bond and his relationship with women in this one, and Guy Hamilton brought this up again. So we didn't say in the beginning scene of the movie, James Bond is making out with a woman, and there's a guy like trying to sneak attack him, and he's able to see the reflection of the bad guy in
her eye.
In her pupil reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, and he makes the girl take the hit. Like, so she gets clubbed, and he said, Guy Hamilton was like, one nice thing about James Bond is, people would always ask me, like, does he have to beat up women? I'm like, yes, of course he does.
Is that his only explanation?
Well, so his explanation was because I think he said like Roger Moore, because he does direct multiple James Bond movies, and he did direct one with Roger Moore, and Roger Moore's like, do I have to be so rough with this girl? And he's like, yes, of course. She's a villain. She would kill you in an instant. Of course, be rough with her.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he justified it as these women were bad and they deserved it. So.
All right.
So there you go.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I guess moving on from here, like one of the weirder parts of this movie is when they go to the factory, when James Bond gets captured and he escapes. And then this part just like, I don't know, it kind of confuses me a little when he's driving down an alleyway and the reflection of the lights are blinding him and he thinks it's another car, but it's just a mirror at the end of the alley that's reflecting at him. And I think that's like such a weird like little thing. And I don't think they explain it well enough.
I don't either, because I remember, I didn't write it down, but now that you say that, I do remember, because it was just like, oh no, it was just the mirror, silly. Like,
yeah.
And so he thought there was like a car behind him, and he ends up crashing into like this stone pillar, and he like a bunch of stones like crash on top of the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like he decimates this building. But that leads into another iconic scene, which is the scene with the laser where James Bond is tied down on a slab, and there's a laser coming up to pretty much castrate him. And yeah, I mean, this scene's great because this is when Goldfinger really gets to play off of him. And it's when, like I said, this is when James Bond is in full outsmarting mode. He has to think of a way to get out of this just by using his words. And you can tell by the look on his face, and he's sweating like he's trying his hardest to figure it out. And there's just a nice tenseness to it all. Yeah, it has one of the most famous lines from out of any movie, and it gets parodied a lot, is like, do you expect me to top? He's like, no, I expect you to die, Yeah, great line. Yeah, and I love how Goldfinger, Sean Connery, I should say James Bond gives a really good example of why he shouldn't die, and it takes Goldfinger like a good minute to finally stop the whole process. He's getting in James Bond's head, letting that laser get as close as possible, and then James Bond's kind of a prisoner for the rest of the movie. Yeah, well, so there was multiple instances, because the reason why he's able to get out of it, like you said, is he's able to kind of trick Goldfinger into, he thinks, he's like, oh, because he was able to hear about this other operation that's going on. So he's like, oh, I know exactly what Operation Grand Slam is. Mm-hmm. And we're all going to Denny's. We're going to go to a baseball game. Yeah, we're taking over baseball, Mr. Bond. But yeah, he convinces Goldfinger he knows his plan, and and Goldfinger was like, well, if, he can't let Bond die, because if Bond dies, then they're going to swarm this place and it's going to ruin the operation. Mm-hmm. So he's like, oh, well, you're worth a lot more to be alive. Because I was kind of wondering that too. Like, why didn't you just kill him and, just be done with it? But yeah, but they do explain. I mean, I do think it's kind of implied, because so the Felix Leiter character is in this movie again. He's from the first two. He's back, and once again, he played by a different actor this time. But anyway, he's kind of keeping a watch on the place. He's kind of
Bond on the outside, and because Bond's whole mission was he was supposed to be undercover during this whole instance, and he was supposed to infiltrate Goldfinger's institution, and he kind of trots Bond out there, and Bond's able to walk freely among the compound. So that kind of stops Felix Leiter from running in. So actually, it was kind of like a smarter move for Goldfinger. So that way the feds wouldn't rush the place saying that Bond was captured or dead or whatever.
Yeah, and so I guess that's something from the book. So I wish I was able to read these books before I watch them, but I guess the book here takes takes a different stance where like the whole idea is that Bond infiltrates and like freezes Goldfinger's assets so they could go to jail for a couple years rather than like, you know, this whole globe-trotting thing. It's a much simpler thing. And I think the Felix thing is more of like a handoff to that, I feel like maybe. It kind of, I guess, grounds it a little. But I mean, what I do like that there is somebody watching and that's how they figure things out. Because have we mentioned his plan? What Goldfinger's grand slam plan is?
No, we haven't. But I was gonna talk about that scene.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So what I love about this scene when we learn about it is that it's completely pointless. Like this scene, but it's so great at the same time.
Yeah, it's a good scene, so I guess it's fine.
Because there's all these gangsters that show up that Goldfinger has borrowed money from, and he's like, gentlemen, he's like, I can either give you your money back today, or I can let you in, and you guys are gonna make tens of millions. And so he goes and explains this whole big plan is that he's going to set a bomb off in Fort Knox. Well, at first you don't realize that, but yeah, he's going to set up a nuclear bomb inside of Fort Knox, so that way all the gold in Fort Knox becomes radioactive, and the U.S. can't use it for over 50 years. So his gold assets are going to be worth 10 times more because of that. But he kind of says like he's going to steal the gold bars or to these gangsters. But anyway, he goes into this great detail explaining about how they're going to do it. And then he just gasses the room and kills all the gangsters anyway.
He tells them all the plan, and then it's just like, okay, now you can die. Like he just needs to get it off his chest or something.
Which is so pointless. Which is a dumb thing because Bond was bluffing the whole time that he knew what Grand Slam was, and Bond was able to sneak in the room and actually learn all the details about Grand Slam.
Of course. It's so silly, but it's worth watching because the set for this is so cool where the gassing, because he has like a map of Fort Knox and the floor opens up and all the windows come down.
The top of the pool table like rotates into like a model of Fort Knox.
Yeah, it's just really cool. It's like a really great set to see. And then, it's worth it. It's a script convenient thing. So the audience gets to know, as well as James Bond. But yeah, I mean, I guess this is also another thing from the book. I guess in the book, he does end up stealing gold from Fort Knox and all of it. But it was going to, I guess, real life, it would take over 2 weeks to steal all the gold from Fort Knox. So they had to think of a way to change it.
They said that in the movie too, because like, Bond was kind of doing the figures in his head because Goldfinger wasn't really going to tell him what was happening, but he was like, oh, go ahead, Mr. Bond, see if you can figure it out. And Bond was kind of thinking, and then it's like, well, if you had this many trucks, like it would probably take you like 12 days to do all that if you had like 600 men or something like crazy like that. And and that's when he figures out, it's like, oh, you're going to set off a bomb inside of Fort Knox, and that's what's going to stop it.
Which we all logically jump to that. That's a very easy logical jump.
Perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, reasonable.
It's funny, and then Guy Hamilton pointed this out, and I think it's funny, like thinking about this. So like we said, this takes place in America. This whole thing takes place in Kentucky, and like the whole
Yeah.
point is like they have like the whole reason Goldfinger gets Pussy Galore and her flying circus because she has like a whole team of blonde women that are
Yeah,
flying
she's like
these
a
planes.
gang leader.
And they all that like the point of their mission is they're going to fly over the military base and gas everybody and knock them out. And I just think you think it's funny because there's this giant compound because Goldfinger has like this army of people and these like bunch of like Asian workers and like these little outfits that are just like running
Yeah.
around. They have like a whole like plane airbase, and the U.S. government is just like, yeah, that's fine. This is just taking place in the middle of Kentucky, and not
Near Fort Knox.
nobody has said anything to these people. Like, what are you doing here? What is going on?
Yeah, like all of these foreign people, all these planes, they had to transport some kind of nuclear bomb or something. No one noticed this or anything. It's like this whole weird thing. It's just kind of funny. And Fort Knox is like one of the most protected places. They tried to film there, and then supposedly it was not even close to possible to do because I guess even the president isn't even allowed in Fort Knox. So
that's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, but they were able to get some aerial shots of it, which I think is really cool. But I guess the set that they did film, that they did make, was like really close to what Fort Knox actually looks like.
Yeah, they said that, so there at the time, I don't know about now, but at the time there really was no photographs or anything of like what Fort Knox looked like. The only thing they had as a reference guide was there was an article that was written about Fort Knox, and there was these hand-drawn pictures of what Fort Knox looked like, and they just said it looked pretty boring, like really standard on the inside. So it's kind of, it looks like a giant prison, like kind of like a big holding area where there's just a bunch of gold bars hanging out. So
yeah, dang, you think it would be something special.
Yeah, like gold bars, gold ceiling, gold floors.
A big golden throne or something. I could see it.
All the toilets are gold.
Of course. Why wouldn't they be? I hope they still are. I hope that I mean, they didn't show the toilet in this, so we don't know.
No, we don't.
Yeah, but no, I like the whole idea. They take a plane and they gas everybody at Fort Knox. They knock everyone out, and it's very fast, like moving. They move trucks up and everything, and they get to stealing fast.
I like it because another thing Guy Hamilton pointed out during the gassing scene is you see like these group of soldiers, they just fall over. And apparently it was the same 10 people like every time. So like every time they would just like have to move to a different location, fall down. And
that's funny. That's funny, the things you don't notice.
He said that they were they're like, this is so stupid. Like they were commenting the whole time. He said, you know what shut them up? I gave each of them $10 and some free beer, and that shut up. And then they were totally fine with doing it.
Oh, hell yeah. Give me free beer and $10. I do this podcast for free. Well, not really.
Wait, you do this for free? I get paid.
What? You get paid for this?
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't supposed to tell you. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I'll talk to our producers.
Look in a mirror.
Yeah. But no, and I mean, so this whole like final sequence happens. Odd Job gets his comeuppance in a really cool way because Bond does fight him, but Odd Job is much stronger. But I do like the way he goes out where James Bond throws his hat at the bars, and James Bond makes a dive as he grabs his hat and shocks Odd Job to death. And I guess in real life, he actually was shocked really horribly from this because he just kept holding on, and because Guy Hamilton didn't say cut, he just stayed gripped to it and allowed himself to get shocked.
He got burned from all the sparks that were coming out. Like he was getting burned, and he had these horrible burns on his hands. And like you say, they're like, why didn't you just say anything? He's like, well, you didn't say cut.
Wow, that's the kind of actor directors want.
That's the kind of actor Alfred Hitchcock would just kill for.
I know, right? Yeah, would absolutely love to torture.
Yeah.
um,
Stanley Kubrick would have loved that.
yeah, man, you sure Guy Hamilton isn't like Alfred Hitchcock?
You
Or
might. I mean,
I
he
don't
made some
know.
pretty good movies.
He did, including this one. Um, the movie doesn't even end at Fort Knox, which I find interesting. And you think this would be the final big set piece, right? Like every time, even this third time when I watched it, I was like, yeah, it ends in Fort Knox, everything wraps up. No, there's like more to this movie because Goldfinger gets away.
Yeah, Goldfinger gets away. He and Goldfinger is technically the first man with the golden gun. Did you see that?
Yes, yeah, he pulls out the golden gun on the plane.
And then Christopher Lee just steals it at the end of this movie. No, not really.
Gotcha. And then years later, he comes back.
But yeah, there's a later movie called The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yes,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, he gets away and Bond is getting commended. They're like, oh, you're going to go see the president. And there's a funny line because he's like, oh, okay, do you have any liquor on the plane? He's like, yep, I told him liquor for 3. And he's like, oh, who are the other 2? He's like, there are no other people.
Seems like something out of like a good comedy, like a Mel Brooks comedy. You never did a spy movie. That'd be no, wait, Get Smart, the TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be perfect for him. But yeah, no, and then what is good setup, because earlier in the movie, Pussy Galore pulls out a gun and Sean Connery is like, hey, you can't pull that out. You can't shoot that in here. We'll just be sucked right out of this plane. Well, Goldfinger does that. He shoots his gun and then he gets sucked out of the plane. What is a fun looking thing because he's just floating in air as he's going through the hole, and it's in classic old school green screen.
Oh yeah, I thought like we said, Goldfinger is a big dude. He's not small, and he's like fitting through this like tiny airplane hole. And I was just thinking, I'm like, his whole body was just like before, like forget about the fall from the airplane. Like his whole body was probably just crushed, like going through that small airplane window.
Yes, I couldn't even imagine. It's like a Homer Simpson gag, I feel like. That's what would be going on. Like he can't fit through the dang window. But he does, and, Pussy Galore lands the plane, and of course, James Bond gets, well, instead of getting saved, he wants to have sex.
He's like, no time for that.
No time to get back home and be safe. Stay here.
I know what gets me going is post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. Well, James has probably been dealing with a lot of post-traumatic stress from a lot of it.
Sex is his coping mechanism.
Yeah. But what I could see it. But I mean, something that we missed from the very beginning of the movie, the title sequence with the Goldfinger song, which this is finally, we hit a very, very, very good Bond song. It's probably one of my favorites, honestly. It's just great.
I've listened to the theme songs from each one, and this is probably my favorite theme song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just so big, so I don't know, there's something about it, the way that what's her name?
Shirley Bassey.
Yeah, Shirley Bassey, just the way she sings and she puts her all into it. It just sounds huge. She even blew out her voice while recording this in the last note.
Yeah, so what she was shown is while she was singing the song, they were showing her the opening credits, so that way she can kind of manage like where to hit the notes at or like when to hit it. And I guess she finished the song like too early, or like she was trying to hit the last note on the final frame of the intro, so she just kept holding that last note, and that's how she blew out her voice.
Like, oh my god, that sucks.
Holding that one note the whole time. And then they did that Bond tribute not too terribly long ago at the Oscars, and they brought her back, and she was still singing.
Yeah, she's still doing great. And the title sequence is great. It's very similar to the last one, but the last one was credits on the women, but now it's clips from the movie projected on a golden woman. I think this is a great intro. It just, it looks good. Very
It
classic
sets,
Bond.
yeah, it definitely sets the tone, and it definitely sets a bar for what's to come. So
Yep,
like, now we kind of know, like, okay, this is what you're going to be expecting,
exactly. And that's
and
what
the
I'm excited for.
yeah, and the openings just get even more creative, and that's it. And so, like in this day and age, too, like opening credits are almost like not a thing anymore.
No.
Like now the movie just kind of starts, and uh, James Bond is one of the few movies that people are like they go there to see the opening credits because they got to
Yeah,
see the song.
you gotta have it. No, there's just something about the Bond formula. It's one of those movie franchises that fits a formula that just you love seeing. There's something about when you go to the theater or even like you just sit at home, you hear the Bond theme, you hear the one-liners, you get that opening title sequence. There's something about it all that's just so comforting. Like Goldfinger is like an ultimate like comfort movie for me now because it just hits all the right notes and I know if I'll watch more, I'll at least get some Bond theme. I'll get a cool opening sequence. Even if the song's bad, it's a James Bond theme. You know, it's just nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, there's really none that are terrible, I would say. And I mean,
No.
I if I'm thinking out loud here, I mean, if you're judging these songs based off of like the songs and not James Bond one, I would think this one is probably like the most James Bond-ish type of songs. And
Yeah, yeah.
because I mean, moving forward, I mean, "Live and Let Die" is one of the songs, and that's just a great song in general.
Yeah.
I don't know how well that really aligns with James Bond, to be honest with you, but
Hmm.
I, to me, this is like when I think of Bond, I think of the Goldfinger theme song.
Yeah, this is maybe the most cinematic, I want to say, right? Because I feel like the song you just mentioned, it works on its own very well. And I mean, Goldfinger does too, to a certain extent, but it feels like a very show tuney, maybe like
It,
cinematic deal.
it's a good song to listen to, but it makes it even better watching it with the credits.
Exactly. Yeah.
It pairs well with the visual aid.
Yeah.
Um, so this movie comes out. Huge hit, very, very,
Yeah.
very big hit. And this is, like I said, this is probably the most important Bond movie, or maybe one of the most important Bond movies, I want to say, because
Yeah.
it smashed all these records that it had before. This movie at one point held the Guinness record for fastest growing movie ever, grossing movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It made like, I think
It
they
made
say it made its budget back in like 2 weeks.
it
Like,
made its budget back in 2 weeks in only 60 theaters,
yeah.
which
Yeah.
is crazy for 60 standards. I mean, now like
Yeah.
now you say a movie made $3 million in its opening weekend and people are freaking out
Yeah.
like, oh my
My
god.
first thing is yikes. Oh no. But no, for this time, because when movies, they cost like $1 then maybe, and now they
Yeah,
cost $13.
just like pocket change now or whatever. uh,
Yeah.
uh, but this movie started all kinds of big booms. Like this launched like the James Bond merch industry, board games, action figures, puzzles, lunch boxes, the little Aston Martin car.
Mhm.
There was all kinds of merchandise for this movie. Definitely started like the spy movie boom. Like a
Yeah.
lot more spy movies were coming out, a lot more parody of this. Just like insane amounts of hype up for this movie. It sold overall. This movie sold 130 million tickets.
Which that is insane. That like 130 million, like million different times this movie was seen in its theatrical run. Not different amount of people, of course. There's people seeing it over and over again, I'm sure, but it's still like that's a big deal. And I mean, this movie made how much? $120 million, $125 million on a $3 million budget. That is an absolutely insane turnover. Like, and it's crazy because I feel like a lot of franchises at the third entry, that's when you might see a dip. That's when you might see like, okay, well, maybe we're kind of slowing down. But for this, James Bond, it was only going up from here, I feel like.
It was, and not to spoil our next episode, but Thunderball would gross even more tickets.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that just like this was like a runaway freight train, so to speak, and it was just like you couldn't slow the momentum down, and you just didn't see a lot of that type of stuff because they would say like it didn't matter what part of the United States this movie was playing in, it would be like in these packed out houses, like they said, like going from like New York to somewhere smaller like Alabama that didn't have a ton of theaters back then. It's like the theaters were just packed out, like everybody wanted to see this movie.
Yeah.
And it released a double bill. Like it got re-released several times. So there was a Goldfinger and Dr. No double bill. Like you can go and watch both of those in one night.
And I guess that was like the first time Dr. No did well, but I think it wasn't until that double bill that here in America that those movies became even more popular. Goldfinger was the first one to really make its like stand here in the States over like anywhere else. So I would love to see a double feature of Dr. No and Goldfinger. That sounds great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And another fact too is this was the first Bond movie that was shown on television.
Okay.
And 49% of Americans watched that movie that premiered on television.
Isn't that insane back in the day that they have numbers like that? When there were so little channels and everybody watched TV that almost half of the country watched it.
I know. And that's like, there's very few events like that you can actually measure. I think like there's other events that beat it, of course. I think like the MASH finale is like one of the most watched things ever on television.
Yeah.
And but it just shows you like how great it was. I mean, Bond was famous before Goldfinger, but this definitely put him in like, okay, this is like cultural iconic figure.
Yeah, this is where it really like went there. And I mean, honestly, from the three that we have covered so far, I think Goldfinger is the best. And I think Goldfinger will rank. I mean, as of right now, I would say it's my favorite out of the ones that I have seen. There's just something about this one that's so quintessentially Bond that I love.
I always said that this one was my favorite Bond movie, but I'm going in with a complete open mind that other ones might change. But out of the three we've seen, because I think that's a question we could ask ourselves at the end of each episode, is just like, okay, so Dr. No is the reigning champion. Is this movie better than Dr. No? We both say yes.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So one thing I do have some other couple of funny moments that I wanted to mention, just kind of like random moments that I'll go through pretty quickly. Was the first scene in Miami when Dr. No Goldfinger is playing a poker game. How ridiculous the green screen poker game looks.
Yes, yeah. Like, I can't believe they had to green screen the pool scene. Like, it looks so bad.
Yeah, Guy Hamilton wasn't happy with that one. He said they want, because that's like the aerial shots and like the scene with Felix Leiter. That's like the only scenes where they actually shot on location in Miami. So the other reason why they didn't was because Sean Connery was busy at the time, like I said at the last episode, filming Marnie with Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes, yeah.
Some other funny stuff. Apparently it's canonical that James Bond hates the Beatles.
Oh yeah, what a weird line. It's like the only way to listen to the Beatles is wearing earmuffs. It's like so bizarre to hear. I guess I don't know how true this is, but in the commentary they said this is the first time the Beatles was ever mentioned in a movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that. The Goldfinger album went gold.
As it should have. It had to.
And you know what it beat?
What?
It beat the Beatles.
Oh, it did. Nice. Yeah. Take them down.
Guy Hamilton had some issues with the censors, which is a little funny tidbit where he, so like during like the sexier type of scenes, he said like the American censor was like adamantly against it, and like the British censor couldn't have cared less about it.
Yeah.
And but then on the opposite end, like during like the more violent scenes, like the British censor was adamantly against them, and the American guy like didn't care at all. He's like,
Yep.
no, that's fine.
That's
And he had, like,
that's the history of both of our countries.
and he had to go back and forth and kind of juggle each one.
Yeah.
Other ones, Shirley Eaton, the Golden Girl, the girl who gets painted gold. She gets like a whole career just based off of this one character in here. Like she definitely it was able to launch her career, and she was in that murder mystery movie. She starred in 10 Little Indians.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say another fun fact is this is the first Bond movie to win an Oscar, and one for sound editing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Completely deserved. It sounded great.
Yeah, I mean, I think about Bond. I think about that dumb gunshot noise. The pew, you know what I'm talking about. It's in GoldenEye, the video game, and it's all over this one. It's great. We didn't talk about Oddjob being in GoldenEye. He's one of the people you can play in the multiplayer.
Oh, that's the rule though. No odd job.
Yeah, no Oddjob, right? That's what everybody says.
Well, yeah. So I mean, an Oddjob is like, he's not even like a small guy in the movie, but like in the GoldenEye video game, he's so much smaller than everybody.
He's actually just a big guy all around in the movie. I don't know why they made him like comically short.
I don't know. One other funny thing was, this is the last one I'll mention, is he said Guy Hamilton had gotten a letter from a fan that said, like, there was such like a weird one. It's like, oh, in this one scene, Bond's tires were this brand of tires, but then the very next scene, it was this tires. Like, please, just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then Guy Hamilton wrote them like this this one letter reply, and he said, congratulations, you caught one of the 6 deliberate mistakes that we made in this movie. Please find the rest of them. And he was like, and he said, I hope that meant that he saw the movie. At least him and his friends saw it like 10 more times.
Well, I mean, I noticed that, and I was pretty angry about it. I'll be honest. It brought it down a little bit.
You had to stop the movie and just to go pout about it for a couple of minutes.
What's sad is, people really are like that with movies. Like, if you have any little thing like that, it's like over. So
how could you? I'm never watching a Bond movie again.
These idiots don't care about truth in a Bond movie.
But
no,
I think that I'm done with that. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No. I think we've said it plenty of times. Goldfinger is a great movie, and I've never seen it. You should see it.
Yeah, and Bond is one of those movies I don't think we've said where these movies stand on their own. It's not canonical where you have to go back and rewatch the other ones to catch up. It's not like all those darn Marvel movies where you got to watch like 30 movies and 5 TV shows just to know what's going on.
Yeah, but, you can actually just go to the theater, watch the newest one, and you're good, right? Well, you can not the new ones. I should say you can go to your local library. That's where you get DVDs nowadays, and you can pick up a James Bond DVD, and it's completely new. You can enjoy it on its own. But
big time recommend, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that wraps it up here for Goldfinger. James Bond will return in Thunderball.
Nice.
Yeah. But what are we going to be talking about on Thursday, Ryan?
Well, going back into that old Toho and we're bringing a little bundle of joy with us, Nathan.
Yeah, woo!
Well, Godzilla's going to get a little additional sidekick, a little baby boy. It's going to be Son of Godzilla, and that is streaming pretty much everywhere. You can watch it on HBO, you can watch it on YouTube, Tubi, completely free if you guys want to watch it. But we'll be here to talk about it. Be a great time.
Yeah. And if you have any recommendations or want to talk about some of the movies that we've talked about here on the show, send an email over at driveindoublefeaturpodcast@gmail.com, as well as follow us over at Twitter at @VIDFpod. But until next time.
Until next time.